Alrighty, everyone. Welcome to our last and final Screencastify lecture for our Unit 6/7 playlist. We are going to be going over Unit 7. You just finished Unit 6. Unit 7 overall is on global conflicts in the 1900 year to the present, so 1900 to 2023. We are not going to be covering all global conflicts during that time. We are solely going to be simplifying to World War I and World War II. And with that, this is even going to be a simplification of both world wars because, again, we are just cramming for our AP exam that is coming up May 11th. With that, before we get started, I'm sorry if there's an echo. And then on top of that, I'm also sorry for my voice. As we all know, I have been having voice issues and throat issues. That is why I'm out for this surgery. Just wanted to give a little disclaimer for that. So let's begin our guided notes. You already know what to do. Whatever is underlined on the screen, you're going to fill in physically in your guided notes. Once you are done with this video, filling in your guided notes, you can then complete the Google form. So with that, let's get started. First, we're going to be talking about World War I causes. First, we will start with the short term, and then we will head to the long-term causes. So the short-term cause of the World War I occurring is going to be the assassination of Franz Ferdinand. He is the Archduke of Austria-Hungary. He will be assassinated in 1914. This will then prompt World War I to be started. Franz Ferdinand is killed by Gavrilo Princip. He is a Serbian nationalist. He kills Ferdinand for the dream, for the expression of wanting to have a Serbian independent state. This is rooted to nationalism because they overall want to have a government, a nation that is only for the ethnicity of Serbians. Austria-Hungary is going to declare war against Serbia after Serbia will refuse to hand over Princip to Austria-Hungary for punishment for his crimes of killing the Archduke Franz Ferdinand. All right, so with the long-term causes, there are a few different ones. So with the long-term causes, historians have created this acronym called MAIN. Each of the letters of MAIN make up one of the many long-term causes of World War I occurring. So let's get started by going through each of the different letters and what they mean. First, starting with M. M is the glorification of military power, as well as building up a state's arms and firepower to basically outdo other nations around them in military power. This is going to start in both Germany and Great Britain in the early 1900s. A lot of this is also going to have to do with industrialization in the time period before. A is related to alliances. Alliances during this time period offered states and governments guaranteed safety and protection from other states, as well as there are some economic advantages to alliances, being that it will stimulate trade amongst alliances. Really, the big idea with these agreements is that if you go to war, we will all go to war. This then elevates conflicts from being just something small between two states into major wars between many different major powers in the world. Specifically in World War I, we are going to see the Central Powers and the Allied Powers. These are alliances between these groups. So we're going to see Austria, Germany, Italy / the Ottoman Empire join together. And then on the Allied Power side, there will be Britain, France, and Russia. The I in MAIN is standing for imperialism. We talked about imperialism last unit, Unit 6. So with that, you already know the definition of imperialism. The Scramble of Africa is going to be an example of how imperialism is going to be a long-term cause of World War I, because the Scramble for Africa is going to cause a power imbalance between the European industrial powers, which is then going to cause tension or increased tension between European states. On top of that, there's going to be just overall an increased competition between European states due to imperialism. So that competition of who has the most colonies, who has the better colonies, all of that. And then very lastly is going to be N in Maine. N stands for nationalism. We've talked about it a ton in this class. With nationalism in this time period, it is like a growing nationalistic sentiment will help fuel militarism, and it's also going to cause its citizens and its government to desire to want to conquer more areas to expand their power. And overall, this is just the expression of wanting to have more political power and like control over others. This will be especially devastating to nations, or like it will destabilize nations, because certain groups of people within states are going to push for an independent country consisting only of their people, of their ethnicity. An example of this is, again, with what we see with the short-term causes. With Serbian nationalism, they want to have their own independent state. So to have that independent state, they will do what they can, and in this case, it is going to be terrorism and assassination of a major political figure. So with that, we talked about causes of World War I. Let's actually talk about World War I. World War I is going to start again in 1914 after Franz Ferdinand is assassinated, and then it's going to end in 1918. For Germany specifically during World War I, we are going to see Germany fight on two different fronts. They're going to be fighting on the west and the east. As you see in this little map and with the arrows, France is pushing in, Russia is also pushing in. So Germany has to push out on both sides of Germany, east and west. So specifically on the western side of Germany, Germany is going to be fighting against France. And then on the eastern side, Germany is going to be fighting against Russia. At the beginning of the war, Germany is going to be doing actually really well. They are going to gain a lot more on the western front versus the eastern front. They are even going to advance into France. They are going to just about reach Paris when both the French and British governments will stop further invasion of the German military into France. The Russians overall during this time period were really strong on the Eastern Front, so it really made it hard for Germans to fight back. So once the French and the British remove Germany's military occupation in France's state, and then with Russia being so strong on Germany's Eastern Front, this is essentially going to... Ooh, bless me. Sorry, my apologies. Excuse me. So with that, Germany losing a ton of military power after France gains back what Germany was invading, and then with Russia just being a really strong military, Germany's resources and money will be spread thin because of this fighting on both fronts. So this is going to cause Germany to weaken during this time in World War I. We are also going to see the rise of new military technology during World War I. Specifically with World War I, we will see the introduction of trench systems. Here's a few pictures of trenches and what they looked like. So the top picture is of just a path within the trenches. And then the bottom picture shows an elaborate form, elaborate map of what trenches looked like at this time. Trenches were systems of interconnected ditches that had multiple different layers and sections. There was different sections, so the frontline trenches, the support trenches, the reserve trenches, and all of them had different purposes for them. Within the trench systems, these were really not great conditions. They were harsh. They had a lot of disease, poor sanitation, and also overall with it just being a ditch, they are going to be subject to harsh conditions of the environment. So the areas where there isn't trenches, that is going to be called no man's land. And the reason why this is important and the reason why you're filling this in, because no man's land is going to be known as one of the most brutal things that soldiers are going to see, because there's just dead bodies across no man's land. Specifically speaking about the new weapons that are created during World War I and used during World War I, we're going to see poisonous gas tanks, fighter planes, flamethrowers, machine guns, and some submarines. And the reason why we have such advanced technology during World War I is because at the same time, the Second Industrial Revolution is happening, starting in 1900, ending until about 1950. So really, World War I and World War II helped push in the second wave of industrialization. Again, just speaking more on World War I, the fighting is primarily going to happen within Europe, though Japan will join the war later within the year 1914, much after Franz Ferdinand is assassinated, though. We will also see that people from colonized states will fight in the European armies. So, for example, people within Africa fighting for their colonized, like their mother country, on the behalf of these European states. Oh, and then let me go back really quickly. Here is just a picture of the different battles that occurred in Europe for World War I. As we see, majority of them happen in Europe. There will be one near Jerusalem, so that's like technically considered Asia, or like the Middle East. So what is happening on the home front? When we talk about the home front with wars, that essentially means everything that the government is doing at home, like their own government's nation, to support the nation's cause in war. A really big continuity throughout history is going to be the usage of political propaganda. This is especially going to be big, though, with World War I. Overall, what political propaganda is any art or media that promotes a local support against a cause or an enemy that is being degraded in some kind of way. Political cartoons also have a political message, of course, that helps define what is good versus what is bad. And with the propaganda for World War I, it has the purpose of calling for people to help the good guys win at war. And with propaganda as well, you are convincing your own citizens that you are the good guys in that war. Continuing on, women are going to be working in factories. We are going to see this begin to happen with the Industrial Revolution, but this will increase tenfold because men are going to be in the war, so they need to make up for that labor that is now lost, so women are going to replace men in those jobs for now. On top of women making up for later labor shortages in the home front, we are also going to see migrant labor have more of a dependence on. So these colonies are going to come from imperialization, Unit 6, and that migrant labor is going to make up for for the labor shortages that are going to occur due to men leaving the factories and fighting in the war. On top of that, governments are going to manage the economy more closely to ensure war efforts, but ensure that there is enough resources for the war. There we go. That's how you say that. All right, so consequences of World War I. First, we're going to see the fall of monarchy, specifically within Russia, with the Communist Revolution as well, Austria-Hungary, Germany, and the Ottoman Empire. Colonialism is also going to happen within this period. Maps are going to be redrawn. We'll see that with the Ottoman Empire specifically. There will be the rise of fascism, and then we will see a shift in global power where the United States is actually going to be the most powerful industrial power after World War I, which was not the case before World War I. Okay, so the Treaty of Versailles. This is going to be the biggest consequence of World War I, something that you should start on your papers. The Treaty of Versailles is the treaty that will officially end World War I. It is both a way to end World War I, but it's also a way to punish the state that was found, quote unquote, at fault for the war, and then also set foundations and principles for peace in the future. With that, the country that they are going to blame or say that is at fault for the war is going to be Germany. The terms of the Treaty of Versailles, like the biggest one that you need to know, is going to be the War Guilt Clause. and in that Germany had to accept blame for the war. They had to have their German military size reduced by a lot. And then also Germany had to pay reparations to allies. And what reparations are is just money in payback for harm and suffering that was caused. So with that, there is going to be tensions that occur due to World War I. Colonial subjects are going to see an end to World War I as an opportunity for independence. A lot of these claims that were made at the the Versailles Conference, where the Treaty of Versailles was made, will be rejected. This is also going to be the mandate system in the Middle East, which will shift control to European powers of Britain and France from the Turkish people after the Ottoman Empire fell. So this goes to consequences of World War I being colonialism, new maps being drawn with new states. We are going to see the rise of several new states because the Ottoman Empire will be broken up into several new states after World War I. Okay, so we're going to see resistance to colonialism intensify. We talked about this already with Unit 6. Gandhi and the Indian National Congress in India will continue to lobby for the end of colonialism within India. And then Leopold Senghor in French West Africa as well. A major consequence of World War I is going to be the rise of a new empire, being Japan. Japan is going to replace Western control in Asia. So they will now be the ones controlling Asia and not really Western European countries. With that, Japan is going to take over many different areas within Asia, creating Japan's New Order, which is also known as the Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere. There's going to be a few mass atrocities that occur due to World War I or during World War I. And mass atrocities just mean very gruesome deaths or very traumatic events that occur in history. First being the Armenian Genocide. With the Armenian Genocide, about 15 million Armenians were killed in the Ottoman Empire. For a really long time, it was debated by historians, sociologists, politicians on if the Armenian Genocide was actually a genocide. And that's because this idea of genocide can be pretty fuzzy based on the requirements on what you would call something a genocide versus what other states identify as a genocide. So overall, it can be a little messy. But overall, a lot of people still did die. 15 to 20 million Armenians are estimated to have been killed in the Ottoman Empire by the Ottoman Empire government. On top of that, there is going to be famine across the globe, but specifically in Europe. This is going to be caused by agricultural quotas put from the 5-year plan from the Ukrainian government. This famine is going to result in 7 to 10 million people dying. And then very lastly, for mass atrocities in World War I, that is going to be with Japan. They're going to invade Japan, causing more than 1 million people to die as a result. All right, so now just talking about more effects of World War I, there's going to be more unresolved tensions caused by nationalism. This will also not be resolved through the Treaty of Versailles. In addition to that, though there is anti-colonial movements at this time, imperialist control will continue. They will not let go of these colonies. So both in India and West Africa, the British and the French will continue to control India as well as West Africa. Another consequence is going to be changes in colonial power. We already talked about this a little bit, but in the Middle East, the Ottoman Empire will disappear, will be basically broken up by force due to the ending of World War I. And then other European countries are going to come in and draw a bunch of state lines, which will then establish new states in the Middle East. So we will see the rise of Iraq, Syria, all of that. And then with that, once more, in Japan, they are going to create the Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere as their empire. Alrighty, so we finished talking about World War I. Now we're going to move on to World War II. Just like we did for World War I, we are going to start off with causes for World War II. Alright, so a really big reason why World War II is going to happen is because of unsustained peace that was supposed to be settled after World War I. So with that, the Paris Peace Conference did not address any of the underlying issues that had led to World War I, so militarism, alliances, imperialism, and nationalism. And also the Paris Peace Conference, that is the same thing as the Versailles Conference. That is where the Treaty of Versailles comes from. On top of that, there's going to be major powers in that conference that are motivated only by their own interest and territorial ambition. So really, they are not caring about peace in the future. They are only caring about their own interest. And then on top of that, we are going to see Italy feeling left out in rewards from states, because the Treaty of Versailles made Germany pay back a bunch of money to the Allied powers. Italy felt left out by that. So that is going to make the Italian government upset. Another reason why World War II is going to happen is because of the Great Depression. So the Great Depression is going to start in 1929. It will actually start in the United States as well. And then it will spread like wildfire across the world very, very soon. The Great Depression is estimated to have ended with about 10 years, so in 1939. The reason why it starts in the United States is because there is a collapse of the U.S. banks. And then from there, once there is a collapse in the United States' banks, the economy of the world is going to be much more connected at this time. So then other governments will feel the U.S. banks shutting down as a result. So as a result of the U.S. banks shutting down, other banks will begin to shut down across the world. And that is simply just because of how economically tied states are going to be to each other in this time period. Specifically within Germany and the United Kingdom, the Great Depression will hit really hard. There will be widespread unemployment and poverty, and also just an overall decline in trade and manufacturing, so the creation of goods. The Great Depression everywhere is going to spark a lot of political and social unrest or upheaval, and there will be a rise in extremist political movements, one of them being fascism. Speaking about fascism, fascism is a cause of World War II occurring in Europe. The two states that are going to fall to fascism is going to be Italy and Germany. So what fascism is essentially it is like a political movement that promotes an extreme form of nationalism, a denial of individual rights, and a dictatorial, which means like a dictatorship, one-party rule. With that, fascism can typically be associated with one political party or like one side of the political sphere. You can be a left political person, like on like the left side of the political scale, and be a fascist. You can also be on the right side of the political scale and be considered a fascist. So it doesn't really matter where your political beliefs lie in terms of like if you're a liberal, if you're a Democrat, if you're conservative, or if you're a Republican. Really, you have to meet the conditions of having extreme forms of nationalism, a denial of individual rights, and then a dictatorship like one-party rule. Fascism is going to rise specifically in Italy and Germany due to the discontent and the dislike towards the Treaty of Versailles. Germany's disarmament is going to be seen as unjust and like an infringement on national freedom, an attempt to weaken Germany's military power. On top of that, the war guilt clause was seen unfair to the German government and the German people, which is then going to cause a lot of resentment between the German people. So on top, a major cause is going to be German militarism and expansion. So with German militarism and expansion after World War I, this is going to be a failure of the agreements that Germany made with signing the Treaty of Versailles, and this is called the failure of appeasement. So this is them purposefully going against the Treaty of Versailles and building up their military again and also expanding into other territories. Specifically in Asia, the cause of World War II happening there is the expansion of Japan's empire. As we talked about, they are going to invade China. They are also going to attack Pearl Harbor in the United States. That is like a harbor in Hawaii. That is going to be in 1941. This attack is going to bring the United States into World War II, which is how the United States will enter into that World War. So with that, the straw that breaks the camel's back. This is going to be the non-aggression pact between Germany and the USSR. This is going to be broken because Germany will invade Poland. They will invade Poland in 1939, and then Britain and France will swiftly declare war against Germany for failure of appeasement and also failure for meeting that non-aggression pact that Germany had signed. So now World War I has begun. Germany is invading Poland. It is 1939. World War II will end about 6 years later in 1945. So similarities and differences in home fronts. Remember what home fronts means. Let's go back to the slide. Home front means everything the government does to support the nation's cause in war. So this slide is really just comparing and contrasting the different home fronts and what they used. So similarities is going to be always the usage of propaganda, appealing to nationalism, and controlling the economy. There will be some differences, being the degree of control over private life and the economy will change depending on the political system that is in those home fronts. So for example, in the United States and Britain, they are under the system of democracy. So with that, there is limited control of economic life. But in totalitarian governments, which Germany is under in USSR, which is the Soviet Union, there's going to be total control. So the government will have complete control over the economy. And here, there's just a bunch of pictures of propaganda posters from World War II. We're just going to skip over this slide. This slide just goes more into what the political methods of the time were. Really, it is a war between democracy and totalitarianism. So mass atrocities in World War II. This is typically what most people associate with World War II. It's just the mass amount of traumatic events and developments that occurred in World War II. Probably the biggest being Nazi Germany and the Holocaust. This is going to kill 6 million Jewish people on top of an estimated 2 to 5 million other people. Those 2 to 5 other million people include people who were gay, disabled, black. Overall, if you were a minority within Nazi Germany, you fell under that category of other, which could then subject you to being killed in the Holocaust or being put into concentration camps. Now, the Axis powers aren't the only group that is committing mass atrocities. The Allies, so Britain, France, and the United States, will also commit a lot of traumatic and very violent crimes against humanity, essentially. There's going to be fire bombings, and that is just when you release a bunch of fire, typically from airplanes, and you light everything on fire. We are also going to see the first usage and the only usage of atomic bombs in war. The United States is going to launch 2 nuclear bombs in Japan, one in Hiroshima and then one in Nagasaki. These bombs are estimated to have killed 250,000 people as a result. Not even just that, but it instantly killed that many people, but there is still a lot of effects after the fact of like health and sickness and disease due to these atomic bombs being fired in both Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Continuing with mass atrocity of World War II, overall, this is just going to be a very devastating war. Both world wars are going to be, but World War II especially. About 50 to 56 million people are estimated to have died, both military deaths as well as civilian deaths in World War II. On top of that, there will be people who lose freedom. People in the USSR will claim that they lose freedom due to the communist revolution that occurs. On top of that, there's going to be the overall perpetuation of discrimination and stereotypes. We will see anti-Semitism, which is deeply, 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 deeply rooted within the Holocaust. That is why the Holocaust happens, because of anti-Semitism against Jewish people. And then on top of that, there is going to be racist sentiments towards Japanese and Asian people within the United States. And this is because the United States will create internment camps for Japanese people. This is where everyone that had Japanese ancestry within the United States in the 1914 time period, or like the World War II time period, had to go to these camps to live in. But they are not the same as concentration camps. They're similar, and I can see how people make that connection, but it is different from the Holocaust. Still, though, it is very, very similar, and it's important to note that. Alrighty, so that was our last slide for World War II and World War I. If you have any questions on anything, please let me know. I am here for you. Now that you have hopefully completed your physical guided notes, if you have not done that yet, go ahead and go back through the video, complete your guided notes, and then you can work on the Google form to receive credit for this lecture, this assignment within our Unit 6/7 playlist. I hope you guys are having a good day. Once again, if you need me, please feel free to reach out whenever you need me. Alrighty.